Ladies and gentlemen, if you have any cell phones or in your pockets or purses, please at this time be so kind as to silence them so they do not interrupt the family during the Hespedim.
While the circumstances under which we are here are indisputably tragic, something that Rabbi Yonason Hertz will address in a little bit, our focus is on Linda's life, Leah Rachel Bas Sarah. And the focus of her life was her family. Her husband of 53 years, Dr. Ron Landau. Her children, Dr. Meir and Rachel Landau, Dr. Jackie and Jonathan Roberts. Her sister, Connie Yaffe, nephews and nieces. Her grandchildren, Ilan, Raphael, Naomi, Asher, Mordechai Eliyahu, Hillel, and Sarah. Also to acknowledge a very dear, close family friend who became part of the family, Joseph Kalimian. Family also wishes to acknowledge the presence of Rabbi David Keene, the chaplain at New York Hospital, Queens. This time I'd like to ask first Rabbi Tzvi Selengut, the rabbi of Congregation Ohev Tzedek in Bell Harbor, rabbi of Jackie and Jonathan's family, come forward to say a parak of Tehillim of Psalms, followed by Rabbi Levi Azdaba of Congregation Beis Yehuda of Bell Harbor, New York. Rabbi Selengut.
Mizmor LeDavid, Adonai mi yagor ba'alecha, mi yishkon b'har kodshecha. Holich tamim ufoel tzedek, v'dover emes bilvavo. Lo ragal al shono, lo asa l'reyehu ra, v'cherpa lo nasa al krovo. Nivza be'enav nimas, v'es yirei Adonai yichabed, nishba l'hara v'lo yamir, kaspa lo nasan b'neshech, v'shochad al naki lo lakach, Ose Eile Lo Yimot Laolam. A song of David. Lord, who may sojourn in your tent? Who may dwell on your holy mountain? One who walks in purity, does what is righteous, and speaks the truth from the heart. Who has no slander on the tongue, nor has done harm to a fellow, nor cast disgrace toward a neighbor. In whose eyes a contemptible person is repulsive, but who honors those who are in awe of the Lord. Who swears truthfully even to personal hurt and never retracts, who does not lend money on interest, nor takes a bribe against the innocent. One who does these things shall never falter.
Mizmor LeDavid, Adonai Ro'in LaYechsa, B'nistashe Yarbitzeini, Amei Menuchis Na'aleni, Nafshi Yesheviv Yancheni, V'magli Tzadek L'man Shmoi, Gam Ki Erech B'geitz Amovis, Le'irada Ki Ati Modi, Shivtechom Shantecha, Hemi Nachmuni, Tarech Lefonai Shulchan Neget Tzededei, Die Shante V'shem Nereishi Keisi Devoyo, Ach Teva Chesed Defuni Koi Mechayei, V'shafte Beveis Adonai Le'irech Yomim. A song of David. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not lack. God causes me to lie down in lush pastures. God leads me beside tranquil waters. God restores my soul and guides me in righteous paths of God's name's for God's name's sake. Though I walk through the valley of shadow of death, I will not fear no evil. For you are with me. Your scepter and staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in full view of my adversaries. You have anointed my head with oil, my cup overflows. May only goodness and kindness pursue me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord for length of days.
I'd like to ask one of Linda's grandchildren, Mordechai Eliyahu, Max, to come forward to say the Perek of Eishes Chayil from the end of Proverbs in memory of his grandmother. He'll be back again later to say a few words. First, Eishes Chayil.
Esher Chayil mimsa, rachok mipninim michra, patach balev bala, v'shala lo yechesar, kimaltehu tov v'lora, kol yemecha yehadar shar tzemer ufishtim, atas b'chapetz kapeha, Aita koni yad sarcher mir merchak tavi lachachma vatakam biod laila vatiten terev leveta v'chok narteha zamasara v'tamchehu miprika penatakarem chagva bios madneha vatamatzoteha Tama kitov sachra v'lo yichbe balayla neva yadeha shulcha bakishor v'chapeha tamchu palech kapa parsaliani v'yadeha shulcha levyono shtiva leveta mishalek hiko veta levushanim my body mastala sheisha gaman levusha Noda b'shavim bala, b'shivto im ziknei ha'etz, sadina stavatim kor, v'chagor nat nalaknani, oz v'adar levusha, v'tischak liyom acharon. Pia pachta v'chachma, v'torat chesed al leshona, Sophia holichot beta, v'lechem atzlot tochel. Kamu baneha Yeshua, Bala vayehala, Rabba bala lo suchayil, Viatalit al kulana. Sheker achen, Vehever ayofi, Isha yirat Adonai, Hitital, Tnula mipriyadeha, Vialelua, Visharim maseha.
Those who would like to take the opportunity at a later time to review that last chapter of Proverbs of Mishlei that Max just recited beautifully in memory of his grandmother, and able to certainly recognize virtues described regarding a woman of virtue and a gallant woman that's certainly applicable to Mrs. Landau. For many years, Linda and Ron and family have had a strong and close relationship as members of the Utopia Jewish Center with Rabbi Yonason and Rabbi Rochelle Hertz. I'd like to ask Rabbi Hertz to come forward and continue the ceremony.
We're here this afternoon to give kavod acharon to Leah Rachel Bas Sarah, born on January 9th, 1939, corresponding to the 18th day of Teves, 5699. Today is the 18th day of Teves, Linda's birthday. And we say goodbye. It's very natural at this tragic moment that we ask why. Why did it happen? Why do these things occur? This week's Parsha of Parsha Shmos, we see that Moshe Rabbeinu himself had questions. Moshe is commanded to go to Paro, ask Paro to free the Jewish people. After Paro heard Moshe's request, Paro's response becomes more cruel, the way he treated the slaves. Orders them to complete their quota of bricks without the benefit of straw. They had to collect the straw themselves. Moshe goes back to Mount Sinai, where he first encountered God, where he was given his task, his mission. Moshe complains. Moshe says, why? You sent me on a mission, and it got worse. Since I came and spoke in your name, the situation is much more intense and more cruel and more harsh than it was before. God answers, you don't know my plan. The process is going to begin now. Torah is teaching us, Moshe's teaching us, that God's plan is not our plan. God's way of doing things might not conform to what we like. And there are things in this world which seem inexplicable to us. The question of why is even a question that Moshe Rabbeinu has to ask. Lo machshavosai machshavosechem. Life is unpredictable. Somehow there's a reason. Somehow there's a purpose. Somehow there's a plan. Linda passed away on Shabbos. Past Shabbos, we read Parshas Vayechi. Vayechi Yaakov be'eretz Mitzrayim shva'as reish shana. Yaakov dwelt in the land of Egypt for 17 years. One of our great commentaries of the last century, the Meshach Chachma, Rav Meir Simcha, points out very insightfully, why does the Torah have to say that he lived in Egypt? We knew where he lived. And he says that there are some people who just live for themselves. There are others who live for the community. And there are others who are even greater, who live for the entire country. Vayechi Yaakov be'eretz Mitzrayim. Yaakov lived in the land of Egypt. Yaakov was an individual who lived and impacted not only on his family, not only on the Jewish community, but the entire country of Egypt. When he died, we read, Avel Kaved L'Mitzrayim. The entire Egypt mourned. Linda lived. Linda loved life. And like Yaakov, she not only lived and had an eternal impact on her family, as you will hear in a few moments as the family will speak, but she also had a tremendous impact on the Jewish community and the non-Jewish community where she lived. She lived to give. Life consists of quality and quantity. The quality of our lives depends on us. The quantity depends on the Creator. Linda had a life full of quality, of value, of distinction, of importance, of impact. We don't know why the quantity was shorter than we would have wanted, but much was accomplished. She made an impact. May her memory be a blessing to Hey Nafshat Srura B'Tzror HaChayim. We'll now hear from her family. In this order, Dr. Ron Landau will speak first. Dr. Meir Landau will speak, then Dr. Jackie Roberts, Jonathan Roberts, and representing the grandchildren, Usher Roberts, Mordechai Eliyahu Roberts, and then Sarah Roberts, and Rabbi Weiss will conclude with other words of hesped. Ron.
Thank you all for coming to the memorial service to Linda Landau, my wife of 53 years. Her memory is honored by your presence, so thank you for attending. A brief history of her life. She was born between Quincy, Illinois and Hannibal, Missouri in a car and attended Springfield High School. Her home was a few blocks from the office where Abraham Lincoln practiced law. The high school reunion some 10 years ago in Springfield, where she attended also. Many of the family are buried in a cemetery in Springfield, 10 feet from the grave of Abraham Lincoln. Being one of the few Jews in a class of several hundred that included the daughter of the governor of Illinois, she took a greater interest in her Jewish heritage. The upbringing was not observant. Although she said that her grandfather, I believe, helped establish a shul in Springfield. She loved to paint and draw and was a member of the school art club in Springfield, and she excelled in art and painting. She entered a B'nai B'rith contest and won first prize for an abstract painting depicting Jewish continuity. This qualified her for a one-year trip to Israel, where she taught English at Sedei Eliyahu and the immigration town of Sderot in the south. She was about 18 years old when she decided on coming back from Israel to attend Stern College to improve her Jewish education. She drew cartoons in the school newspaper. The school benefactor was a Max Stern who earned his money by selling birdseed. He was a major benefactor of the Stern College. So, defying convention, she drew a cartoon in the school newspaper depicting a canary in a cage with money in its beak. And the byline, our benefactor. She was chided by the school administrator for seeming to poke fun at Mr. Stern, but he enjoyed and asked to meet Linda, which he did. She left Stern and decided to study art and math and began to attend City College, where she studied art and math for about 2 years. She did well in math, as I helped her with her homework, and she was counseled to major in math, which she fortunately declined. After graduation, she applied to a Detroit art school, Cranbrook Art School in Detroit, where she studied painting for about 2 years. She drove in a car that I gave her, which I had bought for $25 from a physics student who later got the Nobel Prize. Oh, there's one tidbit I almost forgot, that the children, Ambi especially, when he was born, was put in a crib which had served a number of, 1 or 2 Nobel Prize winners. That was an honor, yes. Anyway, in 1963, after completing my PhD in New York, I flew to Detroit to propose to her, and she came to New York to attend my graduation. We were married in my parents' home during a very heavy rainstorm, which preceded a planned outdoor wedding. The rain ended 1 month of drought and delayed her sister Connie's arrival, which delayed the wedding. Oh, I then got a research position at a government lab near Berkeley, and we made plans to drive to California. We spent time in LA and eventually bought a home in Berkeley. The children were born here, and everyone was proud of the house. We lived there about 7 years, including the 1.5 years we spent in Israel. Among the highlights was a Shabbat dinner with Shlomo Kalbach, who came in our apartment and joined us in the melodic pension. Linda had apparently met Shlomo Kalbach in Israel. I guess she met many hippies. Since the children had not yet arrived, Linda organized a first night community Seder. That's the shul in Berkeley, where Rabbi Saul Berman was the rabbi. Her organization did not go to the cleanup, and fortunately, so in the shul was supposed to daven the next morning, and at one of the events, some man who one never saw and never saw again came to clean up. We naturally called him Eliyahu Hanavi. When Linda became pregnant with our first son, she was quite big and had trouble driving our tiny Saab, so I cut off the bottom half of the steering wheel. Anyway, this worked okay. About this time, she also helped organize the first Hebrew day school with a friend, Barbara Klein. It turned out the administrator had embezzled some funds, and he was dismissed for embezzling funds again. I don't know how long. I think the issue will continue with another administrator. Linda was a member of the Kaiser Health Group, and while pregnant, she made sure that she would meet all the doctors in the group so that she would not be treated by an unknown doctor. Anyway, so delivery was difficult, but that was my oldest son. She was always anxious to organize community events, and so she organized a Hanukkah movie at the shul in Berkeley. And I remember everybody, the group of the children, obviously for the children for the day school or from the Talmud Torah, I remember everybody having a plastic sword and fighting on one open field, and we took movies. It was well received. Anyway, she reached out to accomplished people and was not intimidated by them. We had two guests in particular, a Dr. Goldhaber and a Dr. Aumann, who both later received Nobel Prizes. Our house in Berkeley had a very soft purple color, which seemed to resonate with our daughter. She painted her house in the exact same soft purple shade that was in the house in Berkeley. Linda had such strong, powerful memories of the house and where the children were born that on our 2 or 3 visits to Berkeley, she refused to enter the house. She also reached out to the neighbors across the street. It turned out, to our surprise, these complete strangers, that one of them was a Holocaust survivor who had barely survived, and they, as a result of our contacts and other contacts, they sent their children to the day school, probably the Oakland Day School. And one of the boys became observant, read the Torah, and one of them is active in raising funds for the Holocaust Center in Washington, whether we had some influence perhaps. And then there was another neighbor across the street who had worked in Nachal Sorek in Israel. So, this was a surprise, we thought such a Gentile neighborhood. And just to join in Berkeley, there was at one point during Sukkot in our little Goyish neighborhood, there were 7 Sukkot within about 2 blocks. And there was a Christian minister who started looking, he says, so many Jews here. Anyway, I think I'm out of my written words. I'm trying to think. Well, about that time we went to Israel. We spent about 1.5 years in Israel, went back to Berkeley, then spent another few years in Israel. Oh yes, one thing she did in Berkeley, her artwork was solicited by congregants in the neighborhood. Whenever a rabbi was about to be dismissed, she was asked to write a scroll of appreciation, which she did amiably, did effectively. She also wrote the announcements of my son's and my daughter's birth, and of course their wedding invitations also. Okay, I guess I could continue. Yeah, she continued to do more. Where else were we? Okay. Anyways, I said we lived in Israel. We then went to Israel for another few years, so we lived a total of 4 years in Israel. And I believe she worked as a substitute teacher in Israel. She worked also, when we lived in this area, she worked as a English as a second language teacher. She got at least 2 master's degrees at Queen College. She went back to school again. And so she organized, as some of you know, she organized a comedy night at the Utopia, one at the Rabbi Schoenfeld's Kew Gardens. She also organized an annual comedy night at the Young Israel of Miami, of Greater Miami. So she was always busy. And the past few weeks, right before the tragic, horrific events of her passing, we could only say that she died certainly very quickly, very, very peacefully. She was untouched by the fire. But before these tragic events, we went to many activities. We just the past 2 weeks, we went to a wedding, we went to a dinner sponsored by the Gymnasia School. We went to two shows. We went to the Metropolitan Museum to see the Jerusalem exhibit from year 1000 to 1400, showing original manuscripts by Rambam, written in Rambam's hand also. So we certainly were active. She went to Broadway shows almost just 2 days before. Okay, certainly we're all, well, we're touched by everybody coming. We're troubled and dismayed by these turn of events, and I think I just stop at this point. Thank you.
I want to thank everyone here for coming to pay their last respects to my mom. And I thought I'd tell some stories of what it was like having Linda Landau as my mom. So what kind of mom was she? My mom had an unconventional childhood, and she raised her children unconventional as well. She was not a helicopter mom. She's about as opposite a helicopter mom as you can imagine. At 3, I was, left to play by myself. Actually, at 3, I was old enough to babysit my sister, who was 1. There were some close calls that my family knows about. Thank God we got through them. But one of the problems of leaving a child independent like that is they learn overconfidence. They think they can do anything. And so there was a story which came back to bite my mom in the Tuchus is that I was in first grade in Israel, and there was a child picking on my sister. And so I rescued my sister, and I was upset over this, and I decided to take my sister home. And the teacher said, "Where are you going?" And I said, "I'm going home." And she said, "Do you know the way home?" I said, "Yeah, of course." And amazingly, I crossed the street, I went through the park, went past all these shops, I went across the street again, and we made it back to the apartment with my sister. I was 6, my sister was 5, 4.5. And of course, no one was home at the apartment because my dad was working, and my mom was probably out looking for us. So, I don't know, we loitered at the apartment building for a while. And then I decided, well, this is boring. I'm going to go look for a friend of mine. I had no idea where he lived, but how big could Tel Aviv be? Right? And since my whole world was basically the park next to the school, I went back to the park and thought his house has to be near there. And there in the park was my mom in the middle, crying, screaming my name. And, I was shocked that my mom was looking for me. And I walked over to my mom and I said, "Hi, Mom." And she was so relieved to see me. I can only imagine when she went to the school to pick me up and her daughter, and the teacher said, "Yeah, they left." So, amazingly, I have a daughter now, and she did the exact same thing to me. And I understand, having my daughter have done the exact same thing to me, what my mom must have felt like. My God. She was 2 at the time. So I'm sorry, Mom, that I did that to you. My mom loved life experiences she loved life experiences much more than school. Unfortunately, sometimes she took it to extremes. So back in the 70s, there was a Batman show starring Adam West. It was on at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Unfortunately, at Yeshiva Flatbush, school didn't end until 4:30. But we wanted to watch Batman. So Mom would come every day to school and take me and my sister out 45 minutes early so we could watch Batman. And every day, she'd have another excuse of why it was an emergency that she had to take us out. It got to the point where when I would look at the clock in school, I would, see, oh, Mom's going to pick me up soon for Batman. And I would pack my bags, and the teacher would look at me like, why does he think he's leaving? But one day, the clock ticked past 15 till, and my mom didn't pick me up. And it kept going, and I was looking at the clock. I was wondering, why isn't my mom picking me up? Where's my mom? So school ended at 4:30. I missed Batman. And I walked home, and I said, "Mom, how come you never picked me up? I missed Batman." And she said, "I ran out of emergency excuses, so I told him I was picking you up for Batman." And the administrator didn't allow it. But you can imagine my disappointment when your mom doesn't show up. That's hard. After we came back from Israel, we spent 3 summers in Indianapolis with my cousins. And meant my mom had to drive us from New York City to Indianapolis at the beginning of the summer, and then back from Indianapolis to New York City at the end of the summer. And Mom had a clever way of making us look out the window. At least I think that's what she was trying to do. And that was, she would always pull over at a Howard Johnson's to have an ice cream sundae. But she wouldn't pull over unless we called it out. So me and my sister would look out the window during the drive, and every time we saw Howard Johnson's, we'd scream, "Howard Johnson's," and she'd brake, pull over, and we'd have an ice cream sundae. So one time we were taking my cousin, Howard, from Indianapolis, and he learned the routine. You know, he had good eyesight. He'd always look out. Do we see Howard Johnson's? Because in those days, you know, they didn't have cell phones, they didn't have signs. You kind of eagle hawk and see. And once he saw Howard Johnson's, my mom slammed on the brake. The van almost went onto 2 wheels, but she made that exit. Got our ice cream sundae. Yeah, my mom loved sweets, and she wanted, her way of making our life sweeter was to put chocolate bars in our lunch. Sometimes she forgot the rest of the lunch. But you know, the peanuts had protein. Unfortunately, it came back to bite me in the end because I had a mouth full of cavities and I had to give up the chocolate. But Mom never gave up the sweets. She had a cabinet in her house full of chocolate. I always worried that it would be bad for her health to eat all that chocolate, but I guess it didn't matter in the end. So I guess my point is that growing up with Mom was kind of crazy and zany. It was different. I got to see a lot of Mom because I lived with my mom till I was 28. I didn't move out of the house till I was 28, which is kind of a long time. We shared a bunch of highs and some lows. But I think it gave my mom comfort to have her son in the house, you know, that long. And I think she missed me when I moved out at 28. I went to the University of Virginia. And my mom she wanted to keep up contact, you know, but, you know, a boy goes off to college. So she found out she liked entertainment. And when I was at University of Virginia in Charlottesville, they had a movie festival. She would use that as an excuse to come down to Charlottesville. She would watch the movies. She would listen to the critics, and then at the end of the evening, she would come back to my apartment and she would tell me about it. And then when I went to University of Michigan, they had a movie festival as well, and she came. She did that. And when I was at Michigan, I was there in the PhD program. And I failed the PhD qualifying exam there. I did not finish at Michigan. I was being kicked out, and I was very depressed like today. And the person I called was my mom, and she talked me down from my tree. I thought my life was over. I had failed the PhD exam. I did not know what to do, and my mom talked me down. It was nice to know there was someone I could talk to who understood me, who said, "It's okay, and you'll be all right, and you can rely on your mom. She'll take care of you." And she got me through it. And I kept going, and I eventually graduated at a different university. When I got married, it was my mom who bought the diamond ring for my wife. She went with my wife to Manhattan. She picked it out with her. When I came back from Europe with my wife, my mom met us at the airport in New York, at JFK, and my mom brought a kosher turkey. She had a suitcase with a kosher turkey, a frozen kosher turkey in it. because she worried that there were no kosher turkeys in Rochester, New York. So we brought a kosher turkey back. So Mom worried about me. She loved me, and I will miss her greatly. Goodbye, Mom.
Thank you all for coming to honor my mother's life. I need a standstill, don't I? You know, as my father alluded to, the house, I know you all know about my famous house. And I left there when I was 5. And when my father came after seeing the final stucco color, he could not believe that I had targeted, that I had honed in on the exact shade. But he couldn't believe that I had honed in on the exact shade of purple. We all know there's a million shades of purple. But I had this bond with my mother. Linda Rose Leah Rachel Sucherman Landau. She had a difficult start. So I know she may have been a crazy, zany person and maybe not the parachute mother or whatever it was called. But she grew up a poor girl in Springfield, Illinois with a single mother who worked hard, her sister and a single mother who worked hard to put them both through school all the way to college. And even though all she had was, her sister and her single mother, her mother had a big heart, and her daughters took after her. My mom had a big heart for every creature. She loved animals. She took in strays, especially cats. Sure, Ami, you remember Mitzi and Pumpernickel. Joseph, you remember Pumpernickel. So, as a matter of fact, my grandmother said that when my mother was a child, she loved taking in strays, and she came home one day with a dead cat in her arms, and she said, "Look, Mama, at the perfectly good cat someone threw out." So her kindness was not just limited to animals. She welcomed everyone into life. She was very welcoming, and instilling in me the importance of, being open and welcoming and not excluding anybody. And this amazing quality of hers, this amazing showing of people is testimony to, how she was, how beloved she was. She cared about everyone's welfare, especially the elderly and others in need. We had complete strangers off the street in our Passover Seder. You remember that, Ami? And when she lit her candles Friday night, she had this long list that she used to keep at the candelabra, where she prayed for everyone, began with her family members. She mentioned each child and grandchild by name, and she thanked God for each and every one of us and blessed us, said we should grow and, up to be wonderful and healthy and successful. And then she ended up listing everybody that she knew who was sick, and every Friday night. So, and I got to see that. My daughter and I got to see that when we lit candles. At her winter home in Florida, she started a movie night, and despite the heterogeneous mix of that complex, she managed to find something that suited everyone as well. She never wanted to exclude anyone, made everyone feel special. She was always collecting things for other people, including articles from the New York Times that she thought were appropriate. This article is perfect for this person, and because she read the New York Times cover to cover, because she was always thirsting for knowledge. She made sure I was up to date on everything, despite my time constraints. She was incredibly witty and a quick thinker. We were at a wedding, and her dress caught fire. And I was trying to rip off her clothes or roll her on the floor. People were pouring bottles of Perrier on her. But she had the presence of mind and incredible strength to go over to the bar and pick up this big, huge metal bucket of ice and pour it on herself. And she extinguished the flames that were already singeing her hair. It's this incredible presence of mind that she had. She was always like quick with the comeback. She really presence of mind, which makes this whole tragedy so difficult to understand. And she came to my rescue always. In ninth grade, we were assigned to report on a Scientific American article. And I'm the black sheep of the family. I'm not a physicist, just medical. And my father regularly subscribed, so I approached him, and he gave me a fascinating article on fusion energy plasma physics. And my mother saw me struggling, and she picked up the magazine, and she thumbed through it, and she found an article on amniocentesis, and she saved the day. She then recounted the tragedy their friends went through with Tay-Sachs disease. Their friends lost one child, and then the mother delivered another girl, and they knew she had Tay-Sachs. She was destined to die. And this mother would not interact with the baby, so my mom and the ladies of the shul organized all the women to take turns feeding and caring for her. This tragic story touched me so much, and the genetic technology fascinated me. I was hooked, off to become a reproductive geneticist. And my mom really supported me in this, despite how hard she worked, being a superwoman. You know, my grandmother always said she was so upset to see her two daughters working so hard like her. She wanted them to have an easier life. But I think her daughters were, you know, this is the model they saw, and this was their mantra, this was their ethic, and they worked hard, and they did everything. And she cared for the house. My brother and I tried to do a little household chores, emptying dishwashers, folding laundry. You know, at one point, she was teaching high school. She had all these papers to mark, and my brother and I were helping mark her papers. And then when I got to college, she told me I should just spend my time studying, not worrying about anything else. And I was very lucky because so many people, you know, they have to work through college, they have other things, and I didn't have to worry about anything. You know, everybody calls me smart and everything, but I'm actually a very slow reader. And it took me, it was a lot of work, but I didn't have to do anything else. She made sure that that's all I had to do. And she always encouraged me, you know, so many people try to discourage you. All these boys that I met, why do you want to go to med school? And when I mentioned to my mother, maybe I should go into one of the allied professions, she said, no, don't compromise your goals. Go for the gold. Then when I had children, she continued to help. She took care of Hillel when he was born, brought him to Queens Hospital for lunchtime breastfeeding, as well as doing the same for Sarah. And my older children lived with my parents in middle school and maintained a close bond with them. Aside from helping with work and kids, she made sure my social life was active like hers. She loved theater. She got me tickets to all the great shows. We hardly missed a performance of Shakespeare in the Park. And she loved Hamish Linklater. One time after a Shakespeare performance, everybody's lined up behind the fence to get autographs. And my mother just goes right past the fence. She jumps up and down. She grabs him. She hugs him. And he's apologizing for being all sweaty, you know, after performing. And she says, remember me, you know, I come here every... And he humored her. And, you know, she got a picture with him, and she was so proud of that picture she had with Hamish Linklater. She made sure to see everything. She didn't miss anything. And she made sure I didn't miss it either. Even the producers with Nathan Lane and Matthew Broderick, that was impossible to get because it wasn't like, you know, we were going to spend $400 for a ticket, right? So we saw it because she decided, you know, as a senior citizen to stand online at the theater when it was 0 degrees out She knew no one would be online because they couldn't match her stamina. She had an energy that transcended all age. My friend Kathy helped me with that. She could outswim us all. 10 years ago, my father was in Israel for a family wedding, and she told me to accompany her in all her excursions for just that week. One night, we went to judge a comedy show. Another night, we attended a rock concert in Fordham, Jerry Lee Lewis and Little Richie. The place was full of seniors, jumping up and down. And after 3 or 4 nights, I told my mother I couldn't handle anymore. I was too tired. And she was so feisty and mischievous. There's this famous story when she was a kid with the seed tomato, where she was on a farm, and where she lived, it was farm territory, and her uncles had a special northeast corner or whatever, the sunniest corner, and this tomato that had to ripen so well, they just waited till it practically fell in their hands. They checked on it several times a day. And look at my mother. She's walking through the field, and she sees this delicious-looking tomato. My mother was not one to pass up on an opportunity for a good treat. And she said, boy, I don't know how, wow. She picks it, brings it back, shows her aunts, and she says, look at this amazing tomato. And her aunt says, wow, funny that Uncle Harry missed that one. So she's cutting it up, and they're all eating it zealously, and all of a sudden, Uncle Harry comes in yelling and screaming, who ate the seed tomato? And they took her, and they put her in the ice box, and they hit her until he calmed down. Hit her in the ice box. And until she calmed down. I remember when we were in Israel, my mother couldn't pass up a vendor, a vendor on the highway selling watermelon. So she went and she asked for a taste. She was actually with her friend Rella at the time. And she asked for a taste, and it was awful tasting watermelon. She said, no, I don't want the watermelon. He's like, no, you have to pay for it, and you have to hold I'm going to hold your friend here hostage until you pay for the watermelon. And she says, I'm getting the police. He's like, I'm holding your friend hostage. So she gets in the car, driving off to the police. I said, Mom, you left Rella over there. What, are you kidding? She goes, don't worry, I have a plan. So she drives off, and then she drives back, and the man says, Efo mishtara, Efo mishtara, where's the police? And she yells, Rella, quick, get in! And Rella jumps in, and we speed off. And that was my mom, Anyway, so, one thing I was thinking was I'm really gonna miss. We would sit in shul, and she had such a voice. I don't know if anybody from shul remembers, and she would sing so beautifully. And when I was a kid, I was embarrassed because she was singing so loud. And then, learn to appreciate things as you get older. And, I remember when we went to see my children's productions in school, and they would sing the Star-Spangled Banner and the national anthem, and people weren't singing it very loud. My mother would sing it so loud, and I looked at her, and she said to me, this is a song you sing loudly and proudly. She was a feisty woman, and I'm going to miss her voice, but when I was listening to Max, it brought me such joy that he inherited her wonderful voice. I certainly didn't. It skipped a generation. Anyway, when I was a kid, I would sing to my children. Once they could learn to talk, Max said, Mommy, don't sing. Anyway, but one thing I can take comfort in saying is that we really took advantage of spending a lot of time together. She, we went to Disney last year, and I actually tired her out. And even she had wanted to go to a show on her birthday, and you know, I was so busy these past weeks, and I was supposed to get the tickets, and I didn't. And then she said, that's okay, Jacqueline. She was supposed to go to Florida Wednesday. It got delayed. She had come back to have a tooth implant. But anyway, and she said, that's okay, Jacqueline. We'll see it when I get back. And then her birthday was Monday, but I was working late Monday. We knew we were going to celebrate Tuesday. And Monday, I just made up my mind. I said, you know what? I don't care what I have to do and how much I have to pay, and I don't care what the seats are. I'm getting these tickets. And I actually got the tickets. I'm so happy I got the tickets. And the seats weren't so good, but during the intermission, I asked the usher if we could possibly get better seats. I was always seated behind the tallest person in the theater, who was 6'2". And the usher found us seats in the mezzanine off to the side, and my mother pointed to 2 seats in the center of the front row of mezzanine. And she said, I want to sit over there. Doesn't look like there's anybody there. I said, Mom, there's probably people there. And she's like, I'm going to check. I'm going to ask. She went and asked, and they said, nope, these 2 seats are empty. Plops herself right dead center in the front of mezzanine. The usher comes over to us and says, you know, when you're moving from another seat, you don't move to the front row of the mezzanine. And I looked at my mother, all nice and comfy in there, and I said, my mom's 78, and it's her birthday. And the people in the rows behind us within earshot, they said, it's her birthday, she deserves to sit there. And they said to me, good for you for standing up for her. And, you know, I certainly wasn't as, you know, outspoken as my mother, but she taught me a thing or two. Anyway, so one thing that I'm so lucky to be able to take comfort in saying that I don't have any regrets that I didn't spend enough time with her. You know, we had a real birthday blast. We did actually so much. We went to 2 museums in the past week, and she loved that show so much. She said it was the best show on Broadway. And I do regret, though, that she loved all her grandchildren, and she didn't get to dance at any of their weddings. You know, she would have really danced. But anyway, so thank you all for listening.
I'll be brief. She was quite an extraordinary woman, and what was quite amazing about her is I'd been married 3 years, and they liked to go to Montego Bay at that time. They had a place that they were going year after year, and that was in Jamaica. And I came back to the house for some reason. Jacqueline sent me to Queens to get something, and there's a young couple living in the house upstairs. So I said to them, and they were a Jewish couple, I said, so what brings you here? And they said, well, Linda and Ron said we could stay here. We just got married, and we didn't find a place to live yet. And they stayed there for 3 or 4 weeks, and, you know, that was no big deal to Linda. And then I found out later on that they had taken in Joseph, who had run away from Iran. He literally ran over the borders to get out of the country. And they took him into their house. And what was amazing, to make him comfortable, they said, here's your room. You can do anything you want with it. And Joseph painted the colors that made him still feel comfortable from home. And it was no big deal to Linda. To the point when I met Jacqueline, she said, there's this fellow Joseph that I grew up with. You'll meet him. And he's like another brother to us. And she did that all throughout the 27 years I knew her. Last year and previous years, whenever she would make a Pesach Seder in her complex in Florida, she would invite anybody who didn't have a family. She told me she felt rich because her family was everything to her. And these people don't have families. So I got to meet a Holocaust surviving family. Their last name was also Landau. And the funniest thing is this year they were in wheelchairs and had a tough time getting through doors. So Linda said, let's make the Seder in the hallway. All the Canadians have left. Nobody's going to say anything to us. And the rules didn't apply to her anyway. She did whatever she wanted. And she had Ronnie move a table out into the hallway, and they made the Seder in the hallways. And the Landaus he was, I think, 92. He's still alive. He was able to roll up in his walker right to the table, and his wife, who couldn't get out of a wheelchair, was able. We had our Seder in the hallway. Had the French Canadians been there, they would have screamed bloody murder because it was a fire egress. You're not really supposed to be having your Seder in a hallway, which was, verboten, but it didn't bother Linda at all. So when we would go down there to visit, she wanted to make Jacqueline and her children so comfortable. They have a 2-bedroom apartment down there. She gave one of the bedrooms to Jacqueline. Jacqueline has all the children's clothes down there, and that was the bedroom that the children were supposed to visit. A few years ago, she decided that Ami and Rachel had not come there, and she convinced them to come, and she got her neighbor's apartment for them to stay in, and she flew them out there, rented a car for them, did everything she could to try to make them as comfortable as possible on their trip, because family was the most important thing. When Ami and Jacqueline and I needed to buy a house, she did everything she could so we could go to closing. If our cars were bad, she would give us money toward new cars. There was nothing she wouldn't do for her family or for strangers. And it really was quite an amazing thing. And she really respected independent people and independent women. And she always told me how lucky I was that my mom was so much like her, a very independent person. And she was very strong on women's rights. She expected women to be able to do everything a man could do. And she instilled that in Jacqueline and my daughter. The funniest thing happened when we went to parent-teachers conferences for my daughter. All the teachers had different things to say about Sarah, but when we got to the English teacher, she was a very warm, loving teacher, very much like my mother-in-law. And when the children would come in the room, she would ask them how they are and how they're doing. And then she said to us, Sarah seems very cultured when she writes. She writes like someone who's maybe 18 years old or 20 years old who's been to lots of places, because Linda and Jacqueline would take her to all the Shakespeare and all the Broadway shows from the time that she was probably 4.5, 5 years old. And it made a big impression. And in that particular class, Sarah was getting 99s and 100 because that really made quite an impression on her. And I was just privileged to have such a warm and loving mother-in-law.
Thank you, everyone, for attending Linda Landau's memorial. For those of you who you don't know, I'm Joseph, the one that lived with Linda 35 years ago, 35 golden years. All of you and everybody else in the world, they usually get a chance of having one father, one mother. I was blessed enough to have 2 mother and 2 father. Okay? Linda was and is my second mom. I still have my birth mom. And I cry in her shoulder, and I told her this morning when I was coming that I lost my second mom. But I still have my second dad. 35 years ago, I came to this country at the age of 16. A few months after, I find Linda and Ronnie. Not only they opened their home to me, they opened their heart to me. It was a short time that I lived with them before I found my root. It was only a year, but that year never finished. We were so bonded, we were so close. With Ami, my brother, with Jacqueline, who also my birth sister name is Jacqueline, so I got 2 Jacquelines in life. Okay, and the last time I spoke to Linda was about 3 weeks ago, when she left me a very strong and yet loving message. This is how her message reads, and I wish to God I had it saved. Joseph, you know how long has it been since I talked to you? It's few weeks. Can you let me know how you're doing, how your wife is, how your kids are? That's all I want to hear. And when I called back, I talked to Ron first, and we were on the phone with Linda for over half an hour. And this week, I was looking forward to have my lunch with her to celebrate her birthday. But I'm here now to celebrate her legacy, because she was not just a mother, she was a role model. What I learned from her is open your heart and help one another. Doesn't matter what age or where you come from. I never went to the Jewish school. When I was born in Iran, I always went to public school. But her inspiration, I was on a board member of the yeshiva in Long Island for 4 years. And I've been on the board of our shul for 17 years. All my 4 kids, they're going to yeshiva. That's many lessons that she put in my life. And I promise you all, that's what we should do. And one last thing, her initial, it should be a lesson for all of us. LL, love, laugh, and live. That's what Linda wanted it. Thank you. And I wasn't planning to speak, and I wasn't prepared.
My grandmother very, very much wanted me to tell jokes at her funeral. That was something that she repeated many times. She was very adamant about, but I don't know any that are anywhere near as good as the ones she used to tell, so I'm going to have to tell a story that hopefully you might find mildly amusing. I was living with her and my grandfather when I was in middle school, and she would take care of me completely. She fed me, clothed me, everything that I needed when I was there. She did it all. So when she went on vacation to Chicago over a week, it was a little bit difficult for me because I don't know how well you know my grandfather's eating habits, but they mainly consist of tomato paste and broccoli. So I was either, got to eat that or go through her freezer where she meticulously cataloged all of the food in there, but she used Post-its where people would usually put a date or time. She would put a question mark because she was so honest. She didn't know what it was either, and she didn't mind the risk. So she went to Chicago, and I was eating extra at school, eating whatever I could find around the house, doing whatever I could, and waiting for her to come back. And on the day that she was going to come back, I got a call from her saying that she knew I was probably pretty hungry and, not to worry about it. She had me totally covered. She had a surprise for me, and that I should make sure not to eat anything when I got home because we were going to go and have a good time. And I went with I was very excited all day. I went with my grandfather to the airport, and it was raining and pouring out. And my grandmother, even at that time, was very hard of hearing. So I had to get out of the car, and I'm screaming because I could see her across at JFK, and she was totally oblivious, and I'm just yelling at her, try to come into the car, and it's raining, it's pouring, and we finally get her, and she gets into the car, and I'm starving, and I'm just so relieved and excited to be going back. We're going to go and I'm assuming we're going to go out for dinner because we used to go out for pizza every week. And she refused to tell me what we were going to do until we got home because she said it was too big of a surprise. And we got home and in the kitchen, and she reaches into her handbag and pulls out a bundle wrapped in foil. And I said, what's that? And she said, this is the surprise. I brought it back from Chicago. I'm like, what is it? She opens it up, and it was an old hot dog that she had bought in Chicago a few days prior. And she looked me in the eyes while presenting this hot dog like a newborn child to me. And she said, "Look what I got you. All the way from Chicago. I saved it for you for days. Look how good it is. You get the best meat from Chicago." And I thought I couldn't. I just was totally stunned, and I just started crying because I didn't know what else to do, and she was so wounded because she said to me, you're not going to eat the hot dog? You're not going to eat it after I got you? And I called my parents up because I didn't know what to do. And I was crying on the phone with them. And they couldn't stop laughing. They were just dying of laughter. And they couldn't even say anything to me. And my grandmother's standing there and she's like, you got to eat this hot dog. I brought this hot dog all the way for you. And that's the kind of person she was. It didn't matter whether it was something that people normally did or something that, you know, she had seen other people do. She would just do whatever it is that she thought was the best thing. Because if I had gone to Chicago and I had not brought her back a hot dog, she probably would have been very upset. And of course she ate the hot dog and she said it was delicious. And for years later, she chided me on not eating it and how I missed out on one of the best hot dogs that she had ever had. And, you know, now all I could think of to myself is, I wish she'd just, you know, pull something else out of her handbag.
Once again, thank you all for coming. Thank you, Asher, for this story. I didn't remember it. My grandmother is pretty much responsible for bringing culture into my life, my brother's life. You know, she took me to museums I would never have gone. Now I visit museums regularly thanks to her. She helped dress me when I went to middle school. I lived with her for middle school, and I always remember her cooking and her baking. My favorite cookie was a gingerbread cookie, and she used to. I brought all my friends over. I remember Daniel came over, and we used to make gingerbread cookies sometimes at her house. And when I was in school, I would tell her about what topic I was learning, and she'd be looking through the newspaper, and she always found a topic that correlated. And so I'd go to school, and I'd have the New York Times, I have this newspaper. All my teachers were so impressed, because I always had what to say. And she helped me with all of my papers. I always had great English papers. And one thing I want to say is I noticed this week I was very sad, and I was sitting in shul, and I noticed this week's parsha is Parshat Vayechi, and the last thing Yaakov does is he blesses his children. And I remembered, as my mother said, how every Friday night when my grandmother went in front of the candles, and she blessed every one of her children, everybody she knew who was sick, all of her grandchildren. And she said, "Oh, and thank you for the zechus to name my granddaughter Sarah after my mother. May Naomi grow as beautiful as her mother." And I also remember, very similar to Yaakov, he said, "Hamalach HaGoel." Before I went to bed, whether I was at home or whether I was at her house, my entire childhood, even my first year of college, she would sing Hamalach HaGoel with me every night. And I'd like to say it right now. She had such a beautiful voice. Hamalach HaGoel oti, Hamalach HaGoel oti mikol ra, Yevarech et hane'arim, Vayikarei bahem shmi. Hamalach HaGoel oti, Hamalach HaGoel oti mikol ra, Yevarech et hane'arim, Shmi V'Shem Avotai V'Shem Avotai Avraham V'Yitzchak V'Yidgularov V'Yidgularov V'Kerev Haaretz. Of course, she was much more beautiful. Thank you.
And now my daughter Sarah is going to read a poem that really embodied the whole spirit of my mother.
When I am an old woman, I shall wear purple, with a red hat that doesn't go and doesn't suit me. And I shall spend all my pension on brandy and summer gloves and satin sandals, and say we've no money for butter. I shall sit down on the pavement when I am tired, and gobble up samples in shops and press alarm bells, and run my stick along the public railings. And make up for the sobriety of my youth, I shall go out in my slippers in the rain, and pick the flowers in other people's gardens, and learn to spit. You can wear terrible shoes and grow more fat, eat 3 pounds of sausage at a go, or only bread and pickle for a week, and hoard pens and pencils and beer mats and things in boxes. But now we must have clothes that keep us dry and pay our rent and not swear in the streets, and set a good example for the children. We will have friends to dinner and read the papers, but maybe I ought to practice a little now, so people who know me are not too shocked and surprised when suddenly I am old and start to wear purple.
I'd like to just briefly conclude. I actually wanted to focus on Linda's Hebrew name, Leah Rachel. So perhaps during the Shiva, just to respect the time, I'll share a thought that I have about her first name, Leah. But I'd like to conclude with the thought about her second name, Rachel. And all I need to say is, without any deep, profound midrashic or rabbinic sources, the most famous thing about Rachel that we know in Jewish history is the pasuk in Yirmiyahu Lamed Aleph, Jeremiah 31, V'Rachel mevaka al baneha. It's interesting, if you think about it, it's not true. That Rachel was weeping over the exile of her children. These were not all her children. Her children were a very limited group. In fact, most of her children were not for whom she was crying. She was one matriarch who had 2 children, 2 tribal descendants. But it didn't matter, because Rachel, in this case, Le Rachel Bas Sarah, for her, everyone was her child. Whether her actual children, her grandchildren, whether someone like Joseph, friends, whether total strangers, other anecdotes that I'm not going to into in terms of her care and concern. The fact, for example, that she and Ron were instrumental back in Berkeley in establishing the first Hebrew day school there. Concern for all children, concern for strangers, concern for family, concern for everyone. She was larger than life, and she loved life, and she loved, I believe, to engender within all people whom she met to also love and cherish life. And while her passing occurred in a very profoundly tragic fashion, most importantly, she lived life beautifully, and she beautifully spread that love of life, love of Judaism, love of humanity, love of knowledge, love of comedy, love of everything virtuous in this world. She spread it most beautifully and most profoundly, much more profoundly than her passing. Yeh Zichra Baruch. Interment will be at New Montefiore Cemetery in Farmingdale, West Babylon. Shiva will be observed at the Roberts home in Bell Harbor, New York, until next Sunday morning at 168 Beach 135th Street. Visiting hours, I believe, are 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. This evening, to give the family a little bit of time just to get back, starting 6:30 p.m. till 10, and regularly from 10 to 10. Of course, Friday is also curtailed, and Saturday night, obviously, as well. Sunday morning concludes. Also, to let people know, just because of parking considerations, they're allowed to park on the 200 residence address side of the streets there in Bell Harbor. Family will have the opportunity in the cemetery to ask for mechila on behalf of those, or in the home, or in the family's driveway if there's space at that time. On behalf of all those who will not have the opportunity, we ask mechila, forgiveness from Leah Rachel Bas Sarah for all that we might have done appropriately over the years by omission or commission. Ask her to serve, as she undoubtedly will, in the most strident and most empathic way, as an advocate, as a Melitz Yosher in heaven for her family, who are grieving in a particular way at this time, and to be able to, for them to find comfort and solace and strength to move forward for all of the family members. And this time, most fittingly, to recite the memorial prayer at Hil Mole, ask her grandson, Mordechai Eliyahu Max, to come forward. Oh, you have it?
El male rachamim shochen bamromim Hamsei menucha nechon al kanfei hashechina V'mahalot kedoshim utehorim Ki zohar arakia mashirim Et nishmat Leah Rachel bat Avraham Shelcha liolama Bavur shemishpachta nodvim nitzdaka biaras kara nishmata Began Eden dia menuchasa Lachen bala rachamim yastireha Beseter kinapav leolamim V'yitzror bitzror hachayim Et nishmata Adonai hu nachalata V'tanuach b'shalom ala mishkava V'nomar amen.
Family and friends are asked to come forward to serve as pallbearers.